The huge chamber filled with strange sounds, as creatures from 47 different worlds gathered together. Some looked like giant insects, others were covered in scales like reptiles, and some appeared to be made of living crystal. In the middle of all this noise and movement, Ambassador Lee Taemin sat quietly at a small table marked with the human symbol. Lee Taemin was 58 years old with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent the last 15 years representing Earth and all human colonies in this great council of alien species. Today felt different, though. The way the other delegates looked at him made his stomach tight with worry. The Vorthak Prime Minister stood up on his 6 legs. His body looked like a giant praying mantis, and when he spoke, a small machine around his neck turned his clicking sounds into words that everyone could understand. "We have called this meeting to discuss the humans," the Vorthak said. His large, compound eyes turned toward Lee Taemin. "For 20 years they have worked among us. They have been useful as workers and helpers, but now we must be honest about their limitations." Dr. Park So-jin, who sat next to Lee Taemin, squeezed her hands together under the table. She was the smartest human scientist in the galaxy, and she had spent her whole life studying alien biology and medicine. Her research had saved millions of lives across dozens of worlds. But today, none of that seemed to matter. "The humans think with their emotions," continued another voice. This came from Speaker Kelth of the Sketh, a tall creature covered in blue-green scales. "They cannot understand the advanced mathematics that govern our technology. Their brains work too slowly for important decisions." Commander Kim Jae-ho sat straight in his chair, his military uniform neat and clean. He commanded the human space, forces that protected 3 different star systems from pirates and raiders. Under his leadership, attacks on trading ships had dropped by 90%. But the aliens around him acted like this success meant nothing. "We propose," said the Vorthak Prime Minister, "that humans should no longer be Provisional Council members. Instead, they should become supervised auxiliaries. This means they can still work for us, but they cannot vote on important matters. They must be watched and guided by more advanced species." The chamber erupted with sounds of agreement. The insect-like Vorthak clicked excitedly. The crystal beings called Nexari made musical chiming noises. The reptilian Sketh hissed their approval. One by one, the alien species raised their hands, tentacles, or claws to vote. Lee Taemin watched it all happen with a calm face. Inside, his heart was breaking. He thought about all the human doctors who had worked day and night to cure alien diseases. He remembered the human engineers who had designed better machines and systems for alien worlds. He thought about the human teachers who had learned 47 different alien languages just to help alien children learn better. Dr. Park So-jin had brought thick folders full of reports. These papers showed how human medicine had cured diseases that alien doctors could not fix. They proved how human farming techniques had ended hunger on 12 different worlds. They documented how human diplomats had stopped 3 wars before they could start. But no one wanted to look at these papers. The voting continued. 39 species voted to demote humans. 6 species chose not to vote at all. Only 2 species voted to keep humans as full members. When the voting ended, the chamber became quiet. Everyone looked at the 3 humans sitting at their small table. The aliens expected anger, shouting, or begging. They had prepared for humans to argue and complain and make speeches about fairness. Instead, Lee Taemin stood up slowly. His movements were calm and dignified. When he spoke, his voice was clear and steady. The human delegation understands the Council's decision, he said. We respect your choice. We will begin removing all human personnel from joint operations within 7 standard days. Thank you for allowing us to serve alongside you for these past 20 years. The silence in the chamber grew deeper. This was not what the aliens had expected at all. Dr. Park So-jin gathered her research papers without any hurry. She did not slam them down or throw them away in anger. She simply closed the folders and picked them up. Her face showed no emotion except perhaps a quiet sadness. Commander Kim Jae-ho stood at attention like a good soldier. He did not argue about the safety problems that would happen when his forces left. He did not warn them about the pirates who would return. He simply nodded respectfully to the council. The 3 humans walked toward the exit together. Their footsteps echoed in the huge chamber. No one spoke. No one tried to stop them. The aliens watched them go with growing unease. Something about this quiet acceptance felt wrong, but they could not say what. As the humans reached the door, Lee Tae-min turned back one last time. We wish you success in all your future endeavors, he said politely. Then the 3 humans left the chamber. Behind them, the aliens began to talk again, but their voices sounded less confident than before. The Vorthak Prime Minister tried to restore order, but many delegates seemed distracted. Some of the smarter species were already starting to wonder if they had made a mistake. In their quarters that night, the 3 humans began preparing for departure. They sent messages to every human in council space, giving clear instructions. All human personnel would leave within the agreed time. All equipment and research would be properly transferred to alien control. Everything would be done correctly and professionally. Dr. Park So-jin looked at her medical research one last time. Tomorrow, she would hand over 20 years of work to alien doctors who might not understand its importance. Commander Kim Jae-ho reviewed the security reports that showed exactly how dangerous the outer systems would become without human protection. Lee Tae-min prepared the legal documents that would formally end humanity's relationship with the Galactic Council. None of them complained. None of them spoke angrily about unfairness or stupidity. They simply did their jobs with the same quiet competence they had always shown. Outside their windows, the great space station that housed the Galactic Council continued its slow rotation. Lights twinkled from thousands of alien quarters. But something had changed. In their silence, the humans had said something that their words never could. The galaxy was about to learn what it had really lost. 3 days after the council meeting, the first ships began leaving. Dr. Yoon Min-ji stood in her laboratory on the Andorian research platform, looking at the work that had filled her life for 8 years. She was the chief scientist studying alien plant life, and her discoveries had helped create new medicines and better food crops. The Andorian insects who worked with her watched nervously as she packed her equipment. They had always relied on her to solve the hard problems that stumped their best researchers. Dr. Yoon Min-ji had a gift for seeing patterns that others missed. She could look at a sick plant and somehow know exactly what was wrong with it. "Will you leave instructions?" asked Zixander, the lead Andorian researcher. His antenna twitched with worry. Dr. Yoon Min-ji handed him a data pad containing all her research notes. "Everything is here," she said kindly. The basic procedures should be clear enough to follow, but both of them knew it was not that simple. Dr. Yoon Min-ji did not just follow procedures. She made tiny changes based on things she felt rather than measured. She adjusted treatments based on instincts that 8 years of experience had given her. These were things that could not be written down in simple instructions. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on dozens of research stations and mining platforms. Engineer Choi Dong-woo finished his last day on the Krellin asteroid mines. He had increased their mining output by 300%, using methods that seemed almost magical to his alien co-workers. The Krellin were known throughout the galaxy as excellent miners. Their rock-hard bodies could work in conditions that would kill most other species. But they had never seen anyone work with machines the way Choi Dong-woo did. He could listen to an engine and know exactly what was wrong with it. He could look at a broken drill and design a repair that worked better than the original. "How do we contact you if the machines break?" asked Foreman Clax, his stone-like face showing unusual emotion. Choi Dong-woo pointed to a stack of instruction manuals. "Standard maintenance procedures are in these books," he said. "For anything more complex, you should contact Krellin Central Engineering." Foreman Clax looked at the manuals with growing dread. He had seen Choi Dong-woo fix machines by hitting them in just the right spot, or by rewiring them in ways that the manuals said were impossible. How could books capture that kind of knowledge? In the outer rim of the galaxy, Captain Park Sung-ho prepared his fleet for departure. His ships had been patrolling the dangerous areas where pirates like to attack merchant vessels. Under his command, the trade routes had become safer than they had been in 50 years. The aliens could not understand how he did it. Captain Park Sung-ho never seemed to have better weapons or faster ships than the pirates. But somehow, his ships were always in the right place at the right time. Pirates would come out of hyperspace expecting to find helpless merchant ships, only to discover human warships waiting for them. "Your patrol schedules make no sense," complained Admiral Vextar of the Council Defense Force. "You ignore the optimal routes our computers calculate. You waste fuel flying to empty systems." Captain Park Sung-ho smiled sadly. "The pirates are not computers," he said. "They think like living beings. Sometimes you must feel where they will go, not calculate it." Admiral Vextar did not understand this answer, but he pretended that he did. After all, how complicated could it be to patrol a few trade routes? In the Council's administrative center, Ambassador Kim Hee-jin worked through the legal paperwork required for humanity's withdrawal. She filled out every form correctly and submitted every required document on time. The alien bureaucrats were amazed by her efficiency. What they did not realize was that Ambassador Kim Hye-jin understood their legal system better than most of them did. She had spent years learning not just the written laws, but also the unwritten customs and traditions that really governed how things worked. She knew which officials needed to be approached carefully and which ones appreciated direct honesty. As she filed the final withdrawal documents, several alien officials tried to convince her to delay the process. They had started to realize that humans handled many small but important tasks that kept the Council running smoothly. "Surely we can work out a compromise," suggested Clerk Veltoth of the Nexari. Perhaps the Council was too hasty in its decision. Ambassador Kim Hye-jin continued stamping documents with calm professionalism. "The Council has made its position clear," she replied. "Humans respect the democratic process. When the majority speaks, we listen." Her politeness made it impossible to argue with her, but it also made it clear that she would not change her mind. The withdrawal would proceed exactly as scheduled. Meanwhile, reports began filtering in from across Council space. On agricultural worlds, human farmers had finished their current growing seasons, but would not be starting new ones. They handed over their techniques to alien replacements, but the written instructions seemed incomplete. Jung Tae-hyun had been the chief agricultural specialist for the Proxima system. His crop rotation methods had increased food production by 200% while actually making the soil healthier. The techniques looked simple on paper, but they required constant small adjustments based on weather, soil conditions, and even the position of the local star. These schedules do not account for seasonal variations, worried farmer Theklana, a sketh who was supposed to replace him. Jung Tai-hyun showed her his weather monitoring equipment. "You watch the signs," he explained. "When the morning mist forms differently, you change the watering schedule. When the soil smells different, you adjust the nutrients. The crops will tell you what they need." Farmer Theklana looked confused. Her species was excellent at following detailed procedures, but Jung Tai-hyun was describing something that sounded more like art than science. As the last human ships departed council space, an unusual quiet settled over the galaxy. The aliens had expected drama, protests, and emotional speeches about injustice. Instead, they got professional courtesy and careful documentation. Every human had fulfilled their duties completely before leaving. The Vorthak Prime Minister held a press conference to reassure the galaxy that everything would continue running smoothly. "The humans were useful assistants," he said confidently, "but our superior species will easily adapt to manage without them. This transition will prove that the Council made the correct decision." But in the weeks that followed, small problems began appearing. Equipment broke down in unexpected ways. Agricultural yields started dropping for mysterious reasons. Pirates became bolder in the outer systems. Research projects slowed down as alien scientists struggled with techniques that had seemed easy when humans were helping. The problems were not dramatic enough to cause immediate panic, but they were persistent and growing. The galaxy was beginning to learn the difference between following instructions and truly understanding how things worked. 2 months after the humans left, Emergency Supervisor Gorthan received the call that changed everything. The massive industrial complex in the Kepler system was shutting down, and no one could figure out why. Gorthan was a Gorthani, a species, famous throughout the galaxy for their mechanical skills. His people could build machines that lasted for centuries and repair equipment that other species considered hopeless. But when he arrived at the Kepler complex, he found something that confused him completely. The systems were designed by engineer Bae Ji-won, explained the local supervisor, a nervous Zenthari named Clicketh. Everything worked perfectly when she was here, but now the machines keep breaking in ways that make no sense. Gorthan studied the maintenance records. According to the documentation, the systems were simple. They converted raw materials into finished products using standard industrial processes. The human engineer had left detailed manuals explaining every step. But when Gorthan tried to follow these manuals, nothing worked correctly. The temperature controls seemed too low, but raising them caused other problems. The timing sequences looked wrong, but changing them made everything worse. It was as if the machines were designed to work in ways that defied normal engineering principles. "Look at this," said his assistant, pointing to a massive air recycling unit. The human connected 17 different systems together. The manual says each connection is important, but it does not explain why. Gorthan examined the connections carefully. Each one made sense by itself, but together they created something far more complex than the sum of its parts. Engineer Bae Ji-won had somehow made the machines talk to each other in ways that prevented problems before they happened. 3 days later, the main life support system failed on mining platform 7. The Gorthani repair team rushed to fix it, following the emergency procedures that the humans had left behind. But the procedures were written for normal failures, not for the cascade of problems that was actually happening. "The oxygen generators are working fine," reported lead technician Vorthak. "The carbon dioxide scrubbers are working fine. The air circulation pumps are working fine. But somehow the air is becoming poisonous." Gorthan realized that the systems were interconnected in ways that the manuals could not explain. The humans had understood these connections instinctively, making small adjustments to prevent problems that the other species never saw coming. Meanwhile, hospitals across Council space faced their own crisis. Dr. Shin Ye-yoon had been the chief medical officer for the entire Rigel sector. Her treatment methods had reduced death rates by 40%, making her the most successful doctor in galactic history. The healers of the Ashanti species tried to continue her work. They were the most skilled medical practitioners in the galaxy, able to cure diseases that baffled other species. But when they tried to use Dr. Shin Ye-yoon's methods, their results were inconsistent and sometimes dangerous. "Her notes describe the treatments clearly," said Chief Healer Ashandra, studying the medical files with growing frustration. "But when we follow them exactly, some patients get better while others get worse." The problem was that Dr. Shin Ye-yoon had treated each patient as an individual. She adjusted her methods based on tiny differences that other species could not detect. A patient's emotional state, their family history, even the way they reacted to her presence, all of these factors influenced her treatment decisions. She wrote that patient 447 should receive 30 units of medicine, observed healer Kethallen. But patient 552 with the same disease should receive only 20 units. There is no explanation for this difference. Chief Healer Ashandra tried to find patterns in the human doctor's decisions, but it was like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Dr. Shin Ye-yoon had seen connections that other species missed, understanding her patients in ways that could not be taught from textbooks. The agricultural world suffered the worst problems of all. Human farmers had been responsible for feeding half the galaxy, and their techniques had seemed so simple that any species could master them. But simple was not the same as easy. On the agricultural world of Ceres Prime, the wheat crops that had flourished under human care began dying for no apparent reason. The soil was healthy, the weather was perfect, and the irrigation systems worked exactly as designed. But the plants wilted and died anyway. Agricultural specialist Threnok of the Zenthari examined the fields with growing panic. His species were excellent farmers who had fed their own people for thousands of years, but the human methods seemed to follow completely different rules. "Young Tae-hyun's schedules make no sense," he complained to his team. "He planted these crops 3 days later than optimal. He used less fertilizer than recommended. He watered them at the wrong times of day. By all logic, these crops should have failed." But under human care, those same crops had produced record harvests year after year. Young Tae-hyun had somehow known things about farming that could not be measured with instruments or calculated with computers. The local Zenthari tried to fix the problems by following standard agricultural procedures. They planted at the correct times, used the right amounts of fertilizer, and watered the crops according to scientific schedules. But the harvests continued to fail. The human was monitoring. "Things we cannot detect," realized assistant farmer Kelandra. He made thousands of tiny changes based on information we do not have access to. Similar failures occurred on agricultural worlds throughout Council space. Crops died, soil became less fertile, and food production dropped dramatically. The aliens discovered that the humans had been managing incredibly complex systems that looked simple on the surface. In the research laboratories, progress ground to a halt on dozens of important projects. Dr. Ko Min-soo had been leading the effort to cure Andromedan fever, a disease that killed millions of beings every year. His research was 90% complete when he left. The alien scientists who took over his work found detailed notes and careful observations. But they could not understand how Dr. Ko Min-soo had made the intuitive leaps that led to his discoveries. His notes showed what he had done, but not how he had known to do it. He tested Compound 247 for no apparent reason, said Research Director Kelviath. There was no logical basis for believing it would work, but somehow he knew it was the right choice. Dr. Ko Min-soo had possessed a gift for seeing patterns in data that other species missed. He could look at thousands of test results and somehow know which direction to explore next. This ability had made him the most successful medical researcher in the galaxy, but it was not something he could teach to others. Reports of system failures began flooding into the council headquarters. Equipment broke down faster than it could be repaired. Agricultural production dropped every month. Medical emergencies increased as alien doctors struggled with techniques they could not master. The Vorthak Prime Minister tried to downplay these problems. "These are temporary difficulties," he announced in official broadcasts. "Our species are adapting quickly to manage without human assistance. Full efficiency will be restored within 1 standard year." But privately, he was growing, worried. The problems were not getting better with time. If anything, they were getting worse as the complex systems that humans had maintained began failing in cascade patterns that no one could predict or control. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the difference between knowledge and wisdom, between following instructions and truly understanding how things worked. The humans had possessed something that could not be easily replaced, the ability to see the whole picture while managing all the tiny details that made it work. 6 months after the Council's decision, Chancellor Veltaran of the Proxima system sent an emergency message that made the entire galaxy pay attention. 3 star systems were declaring economic emergency, and the carefully balanced trade networks that had kept the galaxy prosperous for decades were collapsing. The first crisis erupted in the diplomatic sector. Ambassador Yang Soo-jin had spent 30 years learning to communicate with every species in the Council. She understood not just their languages, but their cultures, their customs, and the subtle ways they showed respect or insult. Her replacement discovered this knowledge could not be learned from books. Ambassador Thex Alan was one of the most educated diplomats in Thraxian history. He had studied galactic politics for 50 years and spoke 14 alien languages fluently. But on his first day representing the Council in trade negotiations, he created a disaster that would take months to fix. The meeting was between the Kalori and the Vashan, 2 species that had been bitter enemies for centuries. Human diplomats had spent years building trust between them, creating trade agreements that benefited both sides. The negotiations were delicate work that required perfect understanding of both cultures. Ambassador Thex Alan began the meeting with what he thought was a standard greeting. In Thraxian culture, it showed proper respect for all parties. But to the Kalori, his gesture was a mild insult that suggested they were inferior to the Vashan. Within minutes, the trade talks collapsed into angry accusations. The human ambassador. "Yang Soo-jin never made such mistakes," declared trade leader Kellarian, his forearms gesturing angrily. She understood that what shows respect to one species may show disrespect to another. Ambassador Thex Alan tried to explain his error, but the damage was done. The Kalori delegation left the station, taking their valuable mineral contracts with them. The Vashan, confused by the sudden hostility, also withdrew from the negotiations. 2 days later, both species imposed trade sanctions that would cost the galaxy billions of credits. Similar diplomatic disasters occurred throughout Council space. Human ambassadors had possessed an almost magical ability to find common ground between species that seemed to have nothing in common. They understood that successful diplomacy was about emotions and relationships, not just logical agreements. The security situation became even worse. Without human patrols, pirate activity in the Outer Rim systems increased by 400%. The Council's replacement forces were well-trained and equipped, but they could not match the humans' strange gift for being in the right place at the right time. Admiral Vextar commanded the largest fleet in Council history. His ships had better weapons, stronger shields, and faster engines than the human vessels they replaced. But despite all these advantages, pirate attacks continued to increase every month. Captain Park Sung-ho's patrol routes made no mathematical sense. Admiral Vextar complained to his staff. He ignored optimal positioning algorithms. He wasted fuel flying to systems with low strategic value. Yet somehow his forces intercepted 80% of all pirate raids. The Admiral's own forces, using the most advanced tactical computers in the galaxy, intercepted only 30% of pirate raids. The pirates seemed to know exactly where the Council ships would be, allowing them to strike at undefended targets. The humans predicted behavior, not just movement, observed Captain Kexular, one of Vextar's most experienced officers. They understood how pirates think, not just how they operate. Captain Park Sung-ho had never tried to catch pirates using superior firepower or technology. Instead, he thought like a pirate, understanding their motivations and predicting their choices. This psychological approach had been far more effective than any computer algorithm. The research crisis deepened as alien scientists struggled with projects that had been 90% complete under human leadership. Dr. Ko Min-soo's work on Andromedan fever represented 20 years of careful research, but without his intuitive guidance, progress stopped completely. Research Director Kelviath assembled the best medical minds from 12 different species to continue the work. They had access to all of Dr. Ko Min-soo's notes, all his experimental data, and all his theoretical models. But they could not replicate his breakthrough insights. He tested thousands of different compounds, explained lead researcher Thelovan. Most of them had no logical reason for testing, but somehow he knew which ones might work. Dr. Ko Min-soo had possessed pattern recognition abilities that bordered on the supernatural. He could look at complex biological data and somehow see connections that escaped even the most advanced computer analysis. His departure left gaps in galactic medical research that might take decades to fill. The agricultural collapse accelerated as alien farmers discovered that human techniques required constant adjustment based on variables they could not measure. Crop failures spread across dozens of worlds as alien specialists tried to follow written instructions without understanding their underlying principles. On the farming world of Terra Nova, agricultural supervisor Chendalar watched his crops die despite perfect adherence to human procedures. The soil analysis showed optimal conditions. The weather patterns matched historical norms. The irrigation systems delivered exactly the right amount of water at precisely scheduled times. Jung Taehyun made it look so easy, Chendalar said to his assistant. He would walk through the fields in the morning and somehow know exactly what each crop needed. Then he would make tiny changes that seemed random but always worked. The problem was that farming was not just science, it was also art. Jung Tae-hyun had developed instincts over decades of experience, learning to read signs that instruments could not detect. The smell of the soil, the color of the leaves, the behavior of insects. All of these provided information that guided his decisions. Without these subtle adjustments, the carefully balanced agricultural systems began failing. Food production dropped by 30% across council space, leading to shortages and rising prices that threatened social stability on dozens of worlds. The industrial sector faced similar problems as equipment broke down faster than it could be repaired. Engineer Bae Ji-won's elegant designs had hidden complexity that other species could not master. Machines that had run perfectly for years suddenly developed mysterious problems that defied conventional solutions. She designed these systems to prevent problems, not just solve them, realized Chief Engineer Korth Allen as he examined another failed production line. Every component monitors every other component in ways that our manuals do not explain. The cascade of failures created a feedback loop that made each problem worse. Economic disruption reduced funding for repairs, which led to more equipment. Failures, which caused more economic problems. Social unrest increased as food became expensive and jobs disappeared. In the council chambers, emergency sessions became daily events as representatives struggled to address crises that seemed to multiply faster than they could be solved. The confident speeches about superior alien capabilities gave way to desperate searches for solutions. Perhaps we should consider temporary consulting contracts with human specialists, suggested Representative Kel Ovar of the Nexari during one particularly difficult session. The Vorthok Prime Minister rejected this suggestion immediately. "We will not admit that our species are inferior to humans," he declared. "These problems are temporary setbacks that we will overcome through superior intelligence and determination." But privately, even the Vorthok leadership was beginning to doubt their decision. The galaxy that had seemed so stable and prosperous was revealing how dependent it had become on human abilities that no other species could replicate. The humans, meanwhile, had established new relationships with independent species beyond council authority. Reports reached council space of thriving colonies and successful trade partnerships that operated without council oversight. The humans were not begging to return. They were building something new. 1 year after humanity's quiet departure, Council Chairman Veltar called an emergency session that would determine the future of galactic civilization. The great chamber that had once buzzed with confident voices now held a subdued assembly of worried delegates facing the worst crisis in council history. The economic reports painted a devastating picture. 43 star systems were experiencing food shortages. Industrial production had dropped by 50%. Medical emergencies increased daily as alien doctors struggled with techniques they could not master. Pirate attacks had made the outer trade routes almost unusable. Chairman Veltar, his crystalline form dim with stress, looked across the chamber at the empty seats where human delegates had once sat. Those chairs seemed to judge the assembled. Aliens with their silence. "We must face the truth," Chairman Veltar began, his voice resonating with unusual harmonics of distress. "Our evaluation of human capabilities was fundamentally flawed. We measured their intelligence by our standards and found them lacking. But we failed to understand that intelligence comes in many forms." The admission sent ripples of shock through the chamber. For over 1,000 years, the Council had prided itself on logical decision-making based on scientific analysis. To admit such a massive error in judgment was almost unprecedented. Prime Minister Klekthor of the Vorthak stood slowly. His proud species had led the campaign to demote humanity, and the admission was particularly painful for him. But reality could no longer be denied. The humans did not simply follow procedures, he said, his mechanical translator struggling with the emotional undertones of his clicking speech. They understood systems in ways that our analysis completely missed. Their intuitive problem-solving abilities created value that our metrics could not measure. Defense Admiral Vextar presented the security reports that made everyone uncomfortable. Human Captain Park Sung-ho's forces were not superior in firepower or technology, he admitted, but they achieved results that our advanced systems cannot match. They understood psychology, motivation, and behavioral patterns in ways that our tactical computers cannot replicate. The military implications were staggering. The Council's most advanced fleets, equipped with cutting-edge technology, were less effective than small human squadrons using older equipment. It was not about the tools, it was about understanding how to use them. Medical Director Ash Andra of the Ashanti spoke next, her voice heavy with regret. Dr. Shin Ye-yun's treatment methods seemed simple, but they required understanding that goes beyond medical knowledge. She saw each patient as a complete being, not just a collection of symptoms. Our species are excellent at diagnosing diseases, but we struggle to heal people. The agricultural reports were equally damning. Food production had collapsed across the galaxy as alien farmers discovered that human methods required constant adaptation to changing conditions. The written instructions were only the beginning. The real skill lay in knowing when and how to modify them. Young Tai-hyun made farming look effortless, reported Agricultural Coordinator Threnok. But he was constantly making micro-adjustments, based on information that our instruments cannot detect. He understood the land in ways that cannot be taught from manuals. Ambassador Thek-Salon presented the diplomatic failures that had shattered trade relationships throughout the galaxy. Ambassador Yang Soo-jin possessed cultural intelligence that took decades to develop. He said with obvious embarrassment, "She understood not just what to say, but how to say it, when to say it, and sometimes when to say nothing at all." Research Director Kelviath delivered perhaps the most troubling report of all. Dr. Ko Min-soo's work on critical medical research has stalled completely, he announced. His notes show what he did, but not how he knew to do it. His pattern recognition abilities seem to have operated on levels that our most advanced computers cannot replicate. As report after report detailed the scope of the crisis, a terrible truth became clear. The Council had not just lost useful workers, they had lost essential partners whose unique abilities had been holding galactic civilization together. Speaker Kelth of the Sketh, whose species had voted enthusiastically for human demotion, spoke with unusual humility. We focused on human limitations and ignored their strengths. We called their emotional decision-making primitive, but perhaps we were the ones who lacked understanding. The chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated the magnitude of their mistake. They had created the crisis through their own arrogance, dismissing abilities they did not understand as inferior to their own. "I propose," said Chairman Veltar, "that we formally invite humanity to return to the Council with full membership rights and representation on all major committees. Furthermore, I propose that we create a new classification, essential partners, with guaranteed seats on the Executive Council." The motion passed unanimously. Not a single species voted against it. The crisis had taught them the value of what they had lost. But when the formal invitation was transmitted to human space, the response did not come from the familiar ambassadors who had once represented humanity. Instead, President Kim So-ra of the Human Federation sent a carefully worded reply. The Human Federation acknowledges the Galactic Council's revised position, the message began. We appreciate the recognition of our contributions to galactic civilization. However, the past year has allowed us to establish productive relationships with numerous independent species beyond Council authority. The message continued with polite but firm language that made the Council's position clear. We are currently reassessing our galactic priorities and commitments. We will consider renewed cooperation with the Council on a case-by-case basis as equal partners in mutual endeavors. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. The humans were not desperate to return. They had moved on, building new relationships and creating alternative structures that did not depend on Council approval. Representative Kel Ovar of the Nexari voiced what everyone was thinking. They do not need us anymore. While we struggled with the systems they had maintained, they were building something new. Reports from the independent sectors confirmed this fear. Human colonies were thriving. New trade networks had formed around human expertise. Species that had never been invited to join the Council were benefiting from human knowledge and skills. The humans had not spent the year begging for readmission to the Council. Instead, they had quietly demonstrated their value to anyone willing to recognize it. The galaxy beyond Council space was becoming more prosperous and stable, while Council territory struggled with cascading failures. We taught them that they cannot depend on our approval, admitted Prime Minister Klekthor. Now they have learned to succeed without it. Chairman Veltar called for a formal vote on a new resolution. The Galactic Council acknowledges that its evaluation of human capabilities was based on incomplete understanding and flawed assumptions. We formally recognize that human abilities in intuitive problem-solving, emotional intelligence, and adaptive thinking represent valuable forms of intelligence that complement traditional analytical approaches. This resolution also passed unanimously, but it felt hollow. Acknowledgement of their mistake did not undo the consequences of their decision. In the days that followed, individual council members began reaching out to human contacts, seeking private consulting arrangements and partnership opportunities. But these negotiations proceeded slowly, with humans carefully evaluating each proposal on its own merits. The humans had learned their own lesson from the experience. They would never again allow themselves to become so dependent on the approval of others that their dismissal could threaten their survival. They had walked away quietly when rejected, and they would return only as true equals. The galaxy had discovered that quiet dignity could be more powerful than angry protests. In their silence, the humans had spoken louder than any speech could have. The Council would never again mistake human restraint for weakness, or human cooperation for desperation. The empty chairs in the Council chamber remained empty, serving as a daily reminder of the cost of underestimating others. The humans had not needed to prove their worth through argument or demonstration. They had simply allowed their absence to speak for itself.